Welcome to our webinar on 2020 Trends in Mac Security. But first, let's do some introductions.
I'm Andrew Medeiros. I'm the Senior Product Manager of Jamf Protect here at Jamf.
Aloha, I am Patrick Wardle. I am a Principal Security Researcher here at Jamf and Apple's public enemy number 2.
And my name is Matthias Wolnick. I am the Product Marketing Manager that works with Jamf Protect, and we all love to talk security. So this will be a great opportunity to chat a little bit today. Now today, we're going to learn a little bit more about some of the trends that we've been seeing in the security industry, especially around Mac security over the last couple of months, and some of the things that we're expecting to see in the coming future here. We're also going to look a little bit at some of the trends for Macs and enterprises and look a little bit deeper on what some of those security trends actually mean for organizations. But first, let's start with an overview of Jamf. Here at Jamf, we help organizations succeed with Apple. That is our primary goal. That's our primary motivation, is helping organizations with Apple. We have a variety of products to help with that go from the space of identity with Jamf Connect, managing Apple devices using Jamf Now, Jamf Pro, or Jamf School, securing Macs in organizations through Jamf Protect, and tying all of that together is an extensive community of Apple administrators and Apple experts that together form the Jamf Nation. With Jamf Connect, we help organizations maintain identity on their Apple devices and help ensure that authentication works smoothly with a single sign-on experience that is transparent to the end users. With Jamf Now and Jamf Pro, we provide management solutions to different scales of organizations for simple device setups, management, deployments, and providing strong controls around their environment to ensure that their end user experience is the best it can be. With Jamf Protect, we round out these capabilities by ensuring that organizations have the tools to have visibility into the activity of attackers, of malware, of malicious applications on their Macs, preventing malware and other malicious software from running on devices, and ensuring that compliance will always be met for your Macs. Overall, more than 40,000 organizations rely on Jamf to manage over 17 million Apple devices. A huge percentage of the top organizations in the world rely on Jamf to help them be successful with Apple. And part of our commitment to make this all work is that we have an extensive history of ensuring that we're always compatible with the latest version of Apple software on the day of release. But one of the primary things here at Jamf that we do is we're always learning about what our customers have to deal with, the problems they face, and the difficulties that they overcome. We do this through many different ways, including customer conversations, interacting with customers when they hit problems, and all kinds of similar things. But one thing we wanted to do this year is we said we want to have a better understanding of the security challenges that Mac administrators face around the world, even if they're not Jamf customers today. To accomplish this, we commissioned a survey, a global survey across the Americas and Europe of admins and security professionals to understand the kind of problems that they face and the kind of experience they have with Macs in their environment. This covers a variety of sizes of organizations, and we ensured that about half of respondents came from organizations that are primarily organizations that deploy Macs, and about half of them are organizations that primarily deploy non-Macs, but do have Macs in their fleet. Now let's talk a little bit about the things that we learned about Macs in the enterprise as part of the survey. One of the primary things we discovered is we asked our respondents about whether they expect to increase their Mac deployments over the next 12 months. Organizations that primarily already use Macs told us 74% of them were planning to further grow their Mac install base. But even more interestingly, 65% of the respondents that have primarily non-Macs also told us that they were planning on increasing their Mac deployments. This is something that we've always thought was true, but it was very good to hear from our respondents that this is what they're experiencing in real life.
The 74% increase for enterprise or education organizations that primarily use Macs could be sheer growth of the company or education system, as well as new devices for employees who may be working from anywhere. But either way, that's a testament to the benefits of having Mac be effective within those specific enterprise or education systems. As you'd mentioned, Matthias, 65% of non-Mac primarily, or 65% of primarily non-Mac users, showing that growth is really interesting. I tend to think that has a lot to do with the end user experience that drives the demand for a Mac, which is great to see because we also received from the survey results showing that 71% of everyone polled said that Macs deliver a better end user experience. So I think that's definitely shown in the growth of Mac here.
Now, obviously, Apple is stoked about this increase. Here at Jamf, we are too, but it'd be naive to think that opportunistic hackers, wily malware authors are not taking note of these trends as well. So that is to say, they are also keenly aware of the growth of Mac, especially in the enterprise. So something at Jamf we spend a lot of time analyzing trends from a security point of view. And over the last year or so, we have seen definitely an uptick in attacks targeting Mac-specific users. Again, as I mentioned, hackers are very opportunistic. So as a target or a new platform continues to expand, continue to grow, continues to become more prevalent, they basically see new targets. So this is kind of an interesting trend to see and just something to be aware of moving forward. So kind of in a nutshell, more Macs going to mean more Mac-specific attacks.
An interesting corollary that came out of this, though, that actually might be really relevant to also why Macs are growing in enterprises, is that across all of the respondents, there was a really high percentage, 77% of respondents, indicated that they believe that Macs are more secure, or they perceive Macs to be more secure out of the box than non-Macs, which definitely could explain some of the growth numbers.
Yeah, and also within the survey, 79% of primarily Mac environments say that security reputation influenced the purchasing decision, while 50% or 57% answer the same way for non-Mac environments. So based on what we see on this slide here, we know that Mac's reputation regarding security is being accounted for. And there are a lot of other considerations to consider when displacing PCs, such as third-party compatibility or cost of life cycle of a Mac. So it makes sense security is more of an influential decision in purchasing for Mac environments, where that's part of the story as they're buying those devices to continue to grow.
I think one of the other reasons that this perception holds true is that Cupertino, Apple, has done a really good job baking in a lot of great security features directly into the operating system. And in fact, this is a trend we're seeing coming out of Apple, that every new version of the operating system they released has more and more baked in or built in security mechanisms designed to protect users, thwart attacks, detect and block malware. This isn't something Apple necessarily talks about a lot publicly, but the more we dig into the macOS, we see this. So I think this is something that rightfully contributes to this perception of Macs being more secure out of the box. Some great examples of this include Apple's built-in antivirus capabilities, XProtect, MRT, and then also new technologies or security mechanisms like notarization that are designed directly to protect the end user, both in the consumer space and in the enterprise space.
The thing is also, even with all that great built-in capability that comes out of the box, it's important to remember that there is no such thing as perfect security. A motivated attacker will find ways around the things that they are aware of that they're fighting against, which is always a challenge, which is why in the security world, we oftentimes talk about defense in depth, multiple layers of security, ensuring that we have good coverage of everything. Apple's been really good at responding quickly to things that are happening out there, but at the same time, organizations still need visibility that when the built-in security systems are active and prevent something risky from happening. When something slips past, there still needs to be tooling in place to prevent that activity. And when something novel attacks a Mac, there still needs to be capabilities to identify, respond, remediate that attack. So while these are all wonderful things that are built into the platform, this does not discount the need for additional tooling in the security chain.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think one of the minor critiques I would have is a lot of Apple's security mechanisms are largely non-transparent. We talked about XProtect and MRTs, Apple's malware removal tool. XProtect is their basic signature-based antivirus capability. Apple doesn't publish what they're detecting or when they update this. So, a lot of times the enterprise is in a way somewhat blind into what Apple's activities are going on in this space. So I think having a tool or utility that provides insight into those tools is very important. As you mentioned, defense in depth is arguably the best strategy for securing any system, Mac included. And there are definitely still gaps in, let's say, Mac's security posture, where we've seen wily or creative attackers kind of slip through the cracks. One recent example would be the fact that Apple inadvertently notarized some malicious code, basically allowing it to run even on the latest version of macOS. So that is to say that Apple's security mechanisms, while a great step in the right direction, should not be seen as a panacea. And in my semi-professional opinion, it's imperative to have additional insights and security tools on top of those that can provide increased visibility and the opportunity to detect novel threats based on heuristics or advanced behaviors, and kind of plug some of the gaps that unfortunately still exist even in the latest version of macOS.
So digging a little bit deeper into some of these things, we tried to go learn more about some of the specific security issues that organizations are facing. So let's dig into that a little bit. One of the things we learned is that Mac admins are really good at rolling out updates to macOS. That's wonderful news. We found that generally, based on our respondents, that OS security patches get deployed about 30% faster on Macs compared to non-Macs. And even more importantly, major OS releases get deployed about 2.5 times as fast as a non-Mac OS release. Those are some big differences.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. People often ask me, Patrick, what is the one thing companies or users can do to ensure that their systems aren't hacked? And my number one recommendation is always be running the latest version of macOS. This includes the major version of the operating system and also the security patches that come out. And this is for two main reasons. First and foremost, every patch or release that comes out will fix or address publicly known vulnerabilities and private vulnerabilities as well. So that's good because right out of the box, if you install those, you're going to be protected against those vulnerabilities. Hackers a lot of times will reverse engineer the security patches, and even if Apple has silently patched something, hackers now have the knowledge or the insight to go after unpatched systems. So again, patching paramount, especially in regards to major OS releases. These are the releases we see Apple push out new security mechanisms. We briefly talked about those earlier, but those are the security mechanisms that are baked into the operating system. A recent example is notarization. In a nutshell, this means only code that has been scanned and approved by Apple will run on the operating system. So again, this is a very positive trend to see because I think it really sheds a lot of light into the security posture of the Mac admins, and the fact that they're able to perhaps more quickly apply or roll out these patches is a huge win for the security of the enterprise.
Yeah, and with patching being paramount, it does give Mac admins the ability to shorten the time for attackers to reverse those patches and severely reduce the attack surface of the fleet by deploying a patch as soon as possible. And the things that Patrick had mentioned in the previous slide and this slide is some of the native security tools. These are actually enabled by automatic updates and are pushed silently. And Patrick has mentioned this, that there are no release notes on them. And this is a big benefit to Mac because for organizations that are delaying major OS releases or OS security patches, they are still benefiting from these silently pushed tools that are happening in the background, provided that's enabled. And so having insights, once again, visibility into your fleet to understand where automatic updates are enabled allows you to kind of have some versioning, control, and monitoring of those native security tools.
So the obvious question is, why are people delaying OS patches and rollouts? This is not the newest discussion, right? This has been something we've talked about in the industry for quite a long time. What causes them all to wait? So we started asking. We found that the primary reasons, in order, that our respondents told us of why people were delaying rollouts were the simple act of compatibility testing of the new OS release, the new patch, the compatibility of the security tool stack that they were running, the compatibility of any internal applications that they had built themselves, compliance requirements, maybe that required a specific version or that had not been updated to be compliant yet, and other third-party application compatibility.
I'm not going to lie, it kind of blows my mind that number 2 is security tool compatibility. Now, this is not unsurprising, right? Security tools often are deeply connected into the low-level operating system. One great example we talk about are kernel extensions or texts. This is something that Apple has been deprecating for recent years, which is good for a variety of reasons. First, kernel extensions provide a large attack surface that attackers may actually exploit to increase their privileges. And also, they definitely impact compatibility. There's been a lot of issues where kernel extension, for example, in a third-party security tool, can brick a box during an update or prevent it from being able to boot. However, the fact that these security tools are impacting the ability for the enterprise or for Mac admins to update to the latest operating system version, which we just talked about, often has a host of amazing security improvements, is really, I don't even the world. It's really unfortunate, I would argue, because, in a nutshell, one could argue that these security tools are actually reducing the security of the system by preventing the rapid push out of OS upgrades and patches. So that's very unfortunate, and I think something that cannot be understated.
Agreed. And something I think we're going to get to later on is talking about kind of the time and tools and people. And having a OS patch delay, should in theory make teams increase their visibility and increase the way that they're going to monitor their estate, as there are now known patches out there, whether they're security patches or OS upgrades, but things to be able to monitor that are now public information that could be weaponized against their fleet.
It's interesting once you start asking about what the challenges are with dealing with security incidents on Macs. once we started asking those kind of questions to our respondents, we started asking, what are actually the biggest concerns you have? What are the things that make it challenging for you to contain or remediate an instance on macOS? And the responses that we got back are a little telling. They're primarily unknown threats, lack of time, lack of staff, lack of tools, and lack of budget. It's important to note that 50%, approximately 50% of respondents told us that the fact that they have unknown threats is what really gives them difficulties when it comes to isolating and remediating incidents.
Again, this is not super unexpected. A lot of attacks against macOS are kind of by default or by definition Mac specific. We see a lot of security professionals in the enterprise who are intimately familiar with Windows-based attacks, which have been around for a really long time. But in the Mac space, Mac-specific attacks are still somewhat novel, and as we alluded to earlier, they are increasing now, but still not the same levels as Windows-based attacks. So it is interesting to see that a lot of the respondents kind of identified this and said, hey, look, there's these unknown threats that maybe we don't have a full understanding or grasp about them due to their Mac-specific nature.
Yeah, and unknown threats in general it's such a difficult concept sometimes to wrap one's head around, because obviously in the nature of the title, these are things that can threaten an environment that just truly are not known, but oftentimes a technique or tactic that resembles a prior attack is some attributable information to what's going on, and to glean those insights. And in order to glean those insights, you really do need to have a person in the middle there that is able to interpret what's going on and see what's different, and how things are behaving with a potential unknown threat. So that definitely leads to the time, staff, and tools that are required to remediate and or investigate any of those instances. And one of the responses that we got from the survey as well was that 37% on average responded that a potential security incident was a false positive. So if you take that into account, this is just obviously this feeds the feedback loop. You need better tools to get more accurate visibility to suss out those false positives, but also you need the staff to be able to delineate what is a false positive and what is a true positive. So this is a constant battle between time, tools, staff, and continually defending your network against potential unknown threats.
Yeah, and I think another good point to make is that you almost have two extremes when talking about tools. The first are kind of tools that are very Windows specific, that a company has basically said, hey, we're seeing more Macs in the enterprise. What can we do to basically port our Windows security tools over to macOS? Kind of the same mentality as the opportunistic hackers are having, right? It's like more targets, more opportunities to make money. The issue with that is these Mac threats are Mac specific, and so Windows-based detection mechanisms are essentially moot. So a lot of times now you have Windows tools that really, yes, they can run on macOS, but they're not built from the ground up with macOS in mind, which means they're likely to fail to detect Mac-specific threats, and at the same time might have a significant impact on the user experience, both in terms of high resource utilization or even impacting the user at the UI level, because again, they're kind of coming over from the Windows platform and have been kind of shoehorned into the macOS environment, which is very difficult to do. We're also seeing a lot of tools that are now leveraging machine learning or AI, which, there's some pros and cons to that. But the issue is, Andrew kind of alluded to, these are going to be flagging or detecting a variety of threats, potential threats, or maybe false positives. And if you don't have the staff kind of highly or well educated in the nuances of Mac specific threats, that's going to take up a lot of time. So there's not a lot of expertise kind of processing the output of these tools. And so that can also pose some concerns as well, especially in terms of security incident remediation.
So one more fact we wanted to look into a little bit was, where are organizations actually investing? Where are they expecting to spend more money? Where are they expecting to have to defend more in the near future? And some of the results are really interesting here. Primarily, we heard from our respondents, most commonly, that they're looking at ways to invest in DLP technology, or data leakage protection technologies, closely followed by antivirus, something that has been top of mind for a very long period of time. After that, EDR, endpoint detection and response tools, SIEMs, central locations to collect, analyze, and alert on security incidents, and CASBs, tools to help secure cloud infrastructure and cloud-based services.
I'm actually really excited to see organizations investing in this area. Anecdotally, a lot of times people have asked me, hey, Patrick, the Mac threats that we detect are not super sophisticated. Is that because sophisticated threats don't exist, or we just don't have the tooling and insight to detect them? And unfortunately, again, this is anecdotally, I believe that the answer was more of the latter, right? In the past, we didn't have complex or sophisticated AV solutions for macOS or advanced EDR that are based on heuristic-based or behavior-based activities that have the potential to detect novel or unknown threats. So upside, I think macOS users, especially in the enterprise, are realizing that hackers are very opportunistic, very sophisticated, and as Macs grow, their prevalence increases in the enterprise. Unfortunately, we're going to see more sophisticated and advanced attacks. So the good news is, I think we realize that, and the best way to address that, or one of the best ways, is to start investing in these third-party security tools that can provide detection, remediation, or simply log activity that can be fed into a central logging repository like a SIEM that then security teams can pour through to look for anomalous behavior and likely then detect or uncover even unknown or next generation threats. So for me, this is a really positive step in the right direction and shows that enterprises are understanding the threats that are facing the Macs, and especially in the enterprise, and taking proactive steps to invest in third-party security tools, which I think is amazing. Really good step in the right direction.
Definitely. And I think it's important to point out that we commissioned this survey during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's not surprising to see kind of the shift in these investments that enterprises are making within these third-party tools. I think that the majority of companies out there are going with a more is better approach when it comes to data and visibility, and trying to get as much as possible to really foster that trust within the employee and the tools that they have enabled to allow for working remotely. So I think a lot of this is interesting and shifting kind of from the corporate network to endpoints and understanding new patterns around how employees are working and moving data to power the productivity of their organization within these new times.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, because one of my favorite quotes is not, if you're going to get hacked, it's kind of when you're going to get hacked. And so I think if you have a solution that allows you visibility, insight into what's going on when a hack, unfortunately, invariably occurs, you have the insight to fully understand what went wrong and also the impact, right? Was it a minimal impact, something you kind of thwarted really soon, or is it something that maybe spread throughout your network and really had a very negative impact? I would argue not being able to answer that is almost as bad as kind of the worst case scenario. So again, as Andrew mentioned, organizations investing in having more transparency, collecting more data that the security teams can pour through. I think this really increases their security posture, ideally to prevent attacks upfront, but if not, at least have the insight and the data to pour through after the fact to fully understand the impact of the hacking event. So we've seen that organizations are investing in a lot of third-party security products. That's great. We talked about some of the issues, though, in the fact that a lot of these tools have their foundations in Windows. And that can raise some issues, especially in the efficacy or the efficiency of their ability to detect Mac-specific threats. So I think it's interesting that organizations are hopefully starting to look for Mac-specific security tools, or at least ones that have a proven track record in this space. Because again, as we alluded earlier, a lot of the attacks are tailored specifically towards the Mac platform. And so a product that was born on the Windows side really may not have the ability to detect that threat.
And a great example of that, just to tack on to Patrick, is antivirus, for example. Patrick had mentioned notarization and some of the built-in security mechanisms that Mac does. So a third-party tool that leverages what Apple does on the notarization front and takes advantage of signing information to block at launch for certain antivirus tools is kind of the specific macOS tooling and solution that's required in this growing landscape.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think in order to build a effective security tool that can protect the Mac user and the Mac enterprise, you first have to fundamentally understand macOS at a very low level, and then also deeply understand Apple's security mechanisms to understand both what they provide so you don't duplicate that effort, but then also identify gaps, areas where an attacker may still slip through. And because Apple is not super transparent about these things, this takes a very deep understanding of the operating system and Apple's security posture, then to build an effective security tool that can sit on top of and build on top of Apple's security mechanisms to provide a comprehensive defense in depth strategy, which will ultimately ensure that your Macs will more than likely remain secure.
As everybody listening to this can probably tell, we can talk about this all day long and not run out of fun things to say. But there is a limit to how long we can keep you all here today. So let's talk about what we talked about here for a moment. We just skimmed the surface of some of the data that we collected via this survey on the state of Mac security. Please go find the actual collection inside the ebook, State of Enterprise Mac Security, on the Jamf.com website. The QR code will take you right there. And dig in. Draw your own conclusions. Tell us more. We're always interested in hearing insights and understanding what people are facing and figuring out how to help you all succeed with Apple. As we go forward, there's a lot more additional resources that you can find on Jamf.com, including Jamf Nation, where you have 100,000 members, people who are Mac experts, people who manage Macs, people who deal with Macs all day long, to talk to understand their plight, and to help find solutions to the problems that you face yourself. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you all for your time.
Mahalo also. Thank you for attending. Stay safe, and hopefully see you all in person 2021. Aloha.
Thank you all for joining, and excited to talk to anyone who's interested in Protect and answer any more questions about Apple security.